Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from whichever part of the world that you're watching from, and welcome to this World Water Week's talk show, which is all about the value of corporate water stewardship. So from ripples to waves. We're very happy to have you here in our midst, whether you're joining here in the room with us in Stockholm or whether you're watching online from home, from anywhere in the world. Thank you so much for being here today. Now, my name is Hajer Yacoubi. I am a former United Nations Youth Representative for the Netherlands, and I'm above all very honored to guide you through these next 20 minutes where we'll be diving into an important topic, that of stewardship within the corporate world when it comes to water. Now, we'll be specifically exploring the insights from a recent white paper published by UN Global Compact Network USA on the value of corporate stewardship, specifically highlighting how the private sector can play a crucial role in achieving SDG 6. We'll discuss how businesses can sort of enhance their water strategies to make sure that we have meaningful impact on water security, water resilience, and overall the sustainable futures that we need to be headed towards. And above all, I am very honored to have that discussion and that conversation with the author of that white paper. So I'm very pleased to be joined today here right next to me by Mallory Cannon. Very warm welcome to you. You are the Environment and Climate Program Coordinator at UN Global Compact Network USA.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here. Nice. Mallory, I mean, there's a lot to dive into when it comes to the report, but before we do, can you just help us maybe by having some bit of a general understanding on the background of UN Global Compact and then Network USA specifically too?
Of course. So UN Global Compact is the UN's corporate sustainability initiative. It was founded back in 2000 by then UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, really as a way to involve the private sector in the work of the United Nations. So we support participating companies in integrating principles on environment, human rights, labor, and anti-corruption into their core business operations and strategies. And Network USA is the US country chapter of UN Global Compact, so we specifically work with American companies and kind of facilitate this collaboration between the US marketplace and the broader UN.
Yeah, and when we zoom in on that, right, because we're talking about the topic of water specifically today, how do UN Global Compact overall, but also Network USA specifically, sort of help to drive that global water agenda forward?
Yeah, of course. So water action is a top priority for UNGC. We really see SDG 6 as critical in driving progress across all 17 of the SDGs. Many of these can't be fulfilled, of course, if we don't first tackle SDG 6.
Yeah.
And so this is really reflected in our thematic priorities and our initiatives. So one of these key initiatives is the CEO Water Mandate, which many of you are probably aware of. It's a partnership between UN Global Compact and the Pacific Institute. And it provides a platform for companies to address water challenges specifically and to form partnerships around water. So companies like Microsoft and Nike and Gap are among some of the endorsing companies of the CEO Water Mandate. Water resilience is also a focus area of our Forward Faster initiative, which is an effort to scale corporate commitments in 5 priority action areas to achieve the SDGs by 2030. So that's a bit of a mouthful, but what it essentially means is that a company can publicly commit to our water resilience target, and in doing so, they're committing to take ambitious water action both in their operations and externally in the broader ecosystems and the communities that they can impact. And so we also offer some more general resources through our academy and through some of our thought leadership, which includes our white paper on water stewardship.
Yeah, and maybe we can dive into that because I'm quite curious. It says the value of corporate water stewardship. When we look at corporate water stewardship, can you share a little bit more about what that sort of entails when you talk about sort of the thought leadership behind that report?
Yeah, of course. So this report was really inspired by the 2023 UN Water Conference and then UN Global Compact's Forward Faster target on water. So building on the momentum of the UN Water Conference, we wanted to create a really technical, practical tool for our companies to address both facets of the Forward Faster target. So how they could build resilience within their own operations, reduce water use and increase efficiency, and how they could engage in collective action to kind of work towards this when we talk about driving positive water impacts in vulnerable basins.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, I mentioned it in the introduction. You're the author of this white paper. How would you say that your perspective has sort of influenced the development of, and the development of this report, the approach that it sort of has with regards to water stewardship?
Yeah, so as a younger professional, I think one of the first factors that influenced the report was actually my age. And so it
Okay.
was, you know, working with high-level corporate executives and UN representatives and water experts put me in an interesting position. And while it was a bit daunting, I think in many ways, me being younger and having this curiosity and fresh perspective actually benefited the report. So you can almost think of it like the report filters expert insights through the lens of somebody who's also just learning this information and is asking similar questions that the audience might be asking, because
Right.
our audience for the report is really more general sustainability practitioners who are
Right.
looking to adopt a water strategy. So it's not necessarily your water experts in the room. So yes.
Yeah, and I mean, I always like that. I think many of the issues nowadays that we're dealing with, right? They also have to do with, us being ingrained and sort of like rusted into old ways of thinking, to an extent where we sometimes forget to ask that why question again. Why are we doing things the way that we're doing? And I think when you come in somewhere and you're visiting those systems for the first time, you still have a certain sense of intentionality behind understanding why again is this structured the way that it is. So, yeah,
Exactly. And I
yeah.
think another key piece of it was this storytelling element that we wanted to capture, which is a
Mm.
little bit different than a typical white paper. But, my background growing up in the American West, I've seen glimpses of what water challenges look like in my own backyard. And I
Right.
think that inspired me to want to bring in more of this kind of storytelling element, which
Yeah.
so you'll notice in the report itself, we feature National Geographic photographer Peter McBride, and
Mm.
he has spent most of his career documenting water stress in the American West. And he's from my home state of Colorado, so I had met him and seen him at a number of local conferences.
Oh
He
wow.
actually
Yeah.
walked the length of the Colorado River to kind of
Really?
showcase what water stress looks like on a human and natural level. And
Yeah.
so I felt really inspired to bring that powerful storytelling into the report, which
Yeah.
maybe isn't typical of an industry white paper, but I think it's equally
Yeah.
important to not just give companies the tools
Yeah.
necessarily that they need to improve their water practices, but that we also give them the inspiration to act on
Right.
those tools. So kind of combining both
Those
the
two.
storytelling and the
Yeah.
technical.
And you say equally, I say equally, if not more important sometimes at times, because that's also sort of can drive us out of that, routine that we get stuck into.
Yes.
Let's zoom into the report a little bit more. If we would go to the forward of the
Yes.
report, it sort of analyzes everything through the lens of the diamond water paradox. And when I read that right away, I thought to myself, "Ooh, what's that? Intriguing. Could you maybe help us understand a little bit more what that sort of entails?"
Yes. So the diamond water value paradox, many of you are probably familiar with it, but it examines why we value diamonds, which really have no functional utility for us, more than we value water, which is essential for life. And it's actually a relatively simple explanation. It's the law of diminishing marginal utility, which is an economic principle, and it says the more we have of something, the less we value each additional unit of it. So you could picture a traveler stranded in the desert. He doesn't have any access to water. In that moment, he would highly value a bottle of water. But once his thirst is quenched, every additional bottle of water is less and less valuable to him. And so, since we perceive that water is abundant and widely available, we value it less than diamonds, which we see as quite scarce.
Right. So how does this play a role within the water crisis that we're dealing with?
Because the perception that water is abundant and infinitely available is largely it is a
Right.
misconception.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
47% of the world's population, or 3.6 billion people, experiences water scarcity for at
Yeah.
least a month every year.
Hmm.
There's a cognitive bias that exists, though, that prevents us from fully grasping this really staggering number.
Right.
Water shortages often emerge gradually, and their impacts vary significantly from person to person, region to region, and all of these factors make it a lot easier to overlook the severity and stakes of the crisis. And it's what often leads to an inadequate global response when we talk about these looming existential challenges.
Right.
And so we argue in the forward, though, that if we wait until water scarcity and the challenges of the water crisis are universally palpable, essentially when we can overcome this cognitive bias because it'll be felt everywhere, we will be far past a critical tipping point where we can reverse the impacts of the water
It will be
crisis.
too late, in
Yes.
other words. Yeah.
And so we have to actively work against this cognitive bias and reassess the value of water in
How do-
alignment with what the reality of our current situation is. And
Right.
so
How do
when-
we do that?
so in the report, I mean, we work with businesses, so we really are talking about it within the business context. And I think that companies can play a powerful role in shaping value perceptions, right? Companies are at the heart of our economic system, and they really are a powerful driver in how we perceive the value of goods and services and resources. And so an ambitious corporate water stewardship approach, I do think, can play a powerful role in reshaping and the value of water. So an ambitious corporate water stewardship approach goes beyond harm mitigation. I mean, first and foremost, companies need to reduce their harm and on the environment and on water. But beyond that, we also want companies to strive, once they address that, to actually work towards driving positive water impacts. How can they replenish and restore water quantity and quality in communities and ecosystems? And these types of ambitious actions send a powerful message about its value. This is what signals that this is a resource that deserves careful management, investment, and protection. And I think at scale, these types of corporate commitments, particularly when companies are engaged in them with a broader coalition of stakeholders, can reverberate through our economic and social system, challenging others to act on water. And this eventually will reshape how we value water.
I really love that. It also makes me think of Paul Polman, who's one of the sustainability front leaders, and how he always speaks of net positive. So he says it's not sufficient anymore to just diminish the impacts or the harm that you cause. You need to go beyond it and give back and see how you can replenish and restore beyond what you sort of extracted and have done. Indeed, from a business perspective, that is what they can do to sort of shift that cognitive bias, if you will. I mean, we're here in Stockholm, gathered together with people that, as a collectively a whole, I would say we sort of try to represent the global water community. What would you say is the role of each and every one of us here, whether they're, we're watching here live from Stockholm or whether people are watching from home?
Right.
What can we do?
We have this really unique opportunity here in Stockholm because we have the diverse perspectives of business leaders and government, public policy, youth, all in one place. And I think it's critical that we capitalize on this opportunity by engaging with people outside of our immediate circle. So for me, this might mean attending events outside of corporate sustainability and trying. I want to learn from policymakers and hear their priorities and understand the latest research from academics, because it's these types of cross-cutting conversations that are going to yield the commitments and collective action and partnerships that drive more systemic, far-reaching change than just within our small circles.
Yeah, I really love that. And that's something that everyone can do right after this session, folks. So you have no excuse anymore when you walk out. But Mallory, maybe we can dive a bit more into the specifics also of the examples. Because, I mean, when we talk about sort of the collective action that is needed, collaborating cross-sectoral, but also within sectors, how have you seen, or do you have any specific examples from the report that sort of, can show how we can reach those positive water outcomes?
Of course. So the first is maybe an obvious example, but it's to engage in initiatives like UN Global Compact and the CEO Water Mandate. All the companies featured in this report are participants of UN Global Compact, and they benefit from a wealth of resources and expertise to improve their water strategies. And I'll also share two specific examples from the report. The first is PepsiCo's collaboration with the nonprofit, the Nature Conservancy. And so they worked with the Nature Conservancy on a number of water replenishment initiatives, including an effort to promote water-efficient crops and farming communities along Arizona's Verde River. And all of these replenishment projects restored around 5.5 billion liters of water into vulnerable watersheds back in 2022. Another example I'll share is Microsoft's collaboration with Fido and local utilities in Arizona to deploy an AI-led leak detection system. So this AI-led leak detection system ranks leaks by sizes, and it helps prioritize repairs and maximize water savings. So they deployed the technology by working with local utilities in Arizona into the water management system, and it will actually be replicated in other cities. It's in 2 other cities now, but it just kind of shows the scalable solutions that emerge from working together across various stakeholders.
Yeah, I love that.
And I should note here, when we're kind of talking about collective action and call out, that this report was really a collaborative effort. So we worked with 6 different companies: Microsoft, Cargill, PepsiCo, Gotham Greens, S&P Global, and Xylem, and also, of course, benefited from the expertise of some organizations. So CEO Water Mandate and Series contributed to case studies as well. Then, as well as the contributions of S&P Global and Xylem, they were patrons. So I want to call out that even the report itself was kind of this
It's an
collaborative
embodiment of
effort.
that. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I love that. Hey, and when we dive a bit more into sort of that road ahead, right? So, I mean, y'all came together, discussing these things. I mean, bringing examples forward, best practices, lessons learned. What are some of the recommendations that you can share that were an outcome of the report as well?
Yeah, of course. So we analyzed, after we completed the case studies, we analyzed the high level takeaways from all six, and we pulled out 4 cross cutting priority action areas for companies to improve their water practices. And so the first priority action area is to conduct a thorough water risk assessment that considers both local and regional contexts. And our second recommendation is that companies align their water stewardship strategy, of course, with the specific needs of local communities and watersheds. And you do this by engaging a wide network of stakeholders from communities, public policy, researchers, and this amplifies the impact of your initiatives. Relatedly, our third recommendation is to integrate environmental, social, and governance aspects into your water management approach. And so this is factors all the way from water quantity, water quality, water access, all the way to public policy, board oversight, and ecosystem protection. And what this does is it supports system-wide resilience. So you're
Right.
not just building the resilience of your company to water-related risks, but you're building the resilience of the water system itself and the systems that your company depends on. And this is really how you build resilience. And then our fourth recommendation is to create a transparent system for data collection, analysis, and benchmarking of your water stewardship initiatives so that you're consistently adapting to the changing needs of your local water systems that you
Right.
depend on. And these are kind of high level, but in the report we do break it down and we actually tie each of these areas with specific actions, initiatives, resources to get companies started in each of these 4 areas.
Right. That's amazing because of that it's also you can also sort of apply it across so many sectors and bring those recommendations to many sort of different fields. And for example, if you talk about transparency, of course it boils down to some specificity. That's the word. Always a difficult one because I mean without sort of the disclosure of it and everything, you can't really go to transformation. So you start with transparency. Get to transformation, hopefully. I want to take one step back. I mean, at the very beginning, we talked about sort of your influence being the author of this white paper on the entire development of it. And then you specifically mentioned the fact that you're a young professional. I find that so interesting. Maybe you can speak to that a little bit more when we talk about sort of because these are also very much generational issues that we're dealing with. I mean, there's some intergenerational injustice when you come to think about sort of the ecological crises that we're dealing with, water being one of them. How do you sort of think that young professionals can, play a part when it comes to taking up leadership roles or bringing in their perspective into good water stewardship?
Yeah, of course. I think first and foremost, it's important that young people recognize their unique strengths in this work. I think youth is often seen as a disadvantage in professional settings, but I think it's important that young people start to think about what's a strength about being a young professional. So for instance, in this report, I think being more inexperienced, I was able to ask questions that made the report more accessible to non-water experts. And
Right.
water is a very technical field. It's hard to sometimes get to the root of some of this. And so I actually think that benefited the report. I also think I brought a fresh perspective to the report development process. So the inclusion of more of those artistic storytelling elements in many ways were a result of my inexperience and never having written an industry white paper before.
Right.
But I think it's those unconventional aspects of the report that make it a little more engaging than a typical white paper.
And better, I would say, but that's my word. Those are my words.
Yeah, and so all that said, I think it's crucial to give young people a role and a real leadership agency in this work. People often confine youth to an activist role, and this is not to downplay the importance of youth activism, because I think youth activism is essential for driving change, but it is equally important that senior leaders engage youth in the work that is happening to address some of these major global challenges. And young people today are incredibly smart and capable and passionate, and I think if you give them the leadership and the agency to engage in some of these initiatives, you'll be impressed with what they produce.
Yeah.
By combining the expertise and the wisdom of our more experienced leaders with the energy and the innovation of youth, we can develop better solutions to these complex, multifaceted challenges like the water crisis or climate change, because it's these types of cross-cutting collaborations, whether it's generations, public, private sector, that's going to yield the ripple effect that we need to truly tackle the water crisis.
Yeah.
So,
That's
yeah.
beautifully said. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you so much, Mallory Cannon. And thank you to all of you for tuning in. If you want to find out more about the report, then make sure to check the QR code that we have up on the screen right now. There you can find the report, you can read it, go through it yourself, find that diamond water value paradox and read about it too. But above all, make sure that you derive the recommendations from it. And I think, yeah, you spoke so beautifully about indeed the impact that each and every one of us can have. See what your uniqueness in is and bring in those valuable assets, because there's a lot of work to do, and we can all display our own water stewardship all together. Thank you so much for listening, and we see you with the next talk show. Thank you so much.